It was a quiet, sun-drenched morning in Frederick, Colorado on August 13, 2018. Suburban silence draped over the cul-de-sacs, where houses stood in neat rows like polished trophies of the American dream. On one of those streets sat the Watts family home, a two-story beige house with a wraparound porch and a bright green lawn. By all appearances, it looked like the residence of a loving, successful family. But inside, something far darker was unraveling. Just after 1:40 p.m., a worried friend, Nicole Atkinson, called the police for a wellness check. Her best friend, Shanann Watts, hadn't shown up for a doctor's appointment. She wasn't answering her phone. Nicole had dropped Shanann off at home around 2 a.m. after a business trip. Now she couldn't reach her, and she knew something wasn't right. Shanann was 15 weeks pregnant. She had 2 young daughters. She wouldn't just disappear. An officer from the Frederick Police Department responded to the call. Bodycam footage later showed him knocking, then pacing outside the home, calling Shanann's name. The house was locked, the car was in the garage, and her shoes were by the door. Within minutes, Chris Watts, the seemingly devoted husband, pulled into the driveway, greeting officers with an oddly composed demeanor. He gave them permission to enter. Inside, the home looked tidy, untouched, almost too untouched. Shanann's phone and purse were on the kitchen counter. Her car, still in the garage, had the girls' car seats in it. It didn't add up. Chris seemed off. He wasn't frantic. He wasn't emotional. He barely asked questions. And when he did speak, he mumbled, offering robotic responses and empty eyes. In the following hours, he told investigators that he and Shanann had an emotional conversation early that morning. He claimed she told him she was taking the kids to a friend's house and never returned. But even in those first few hours, the story had cracks. Shanann had a strong online presence. She posted regularly, photos, videos, emotional updates about her life, marriage, and children. Her social media told the world she was in love with her husband, proud of her daughters, and excited about the new baby on the way, a boy they planned to name Nico. But in private, things were unraveling. Detectives soon learned that Chris Watts had been having an affair with a co-worker, a woman named Nicole Kessinger. He had told Nicole that he was separated, that the divorce was almost finalized. He portrayed himself as a man on the brink of a new life. In reality, there were no divorce papers. There had been no legal separation, only secrets. As the search for Shanann and her daughters intensified, Chris remained at the center of it. He appeared on local news stations, pleading for their safe return. But the public saw through him. His affect was flat. His words lacked sincerity. Even his body language seemed rehearsed. It was as though he knew exactly what he was supposed to say, but couldn't quite fake the urgency. 2 days after the disappearance, Chris failed a polygraph test. And that was when everything began to unravel. Sitting in a small room at the Frederick Police Department with detectives pressing in, he finally broke. Just a little. He didn't confess to everything, not yet. Instead, he made a partial admission. He said that after he told Shanann he wanted a separation, she had hurt the girls, and in a fit of rage, he had killed her. But the detectives weren't buying it, and neither was the FBI, who had joined the investigation. When they searched Chris's workplace, a remote oil field owned by Anadarko Petroleum, they found something horrifying. In a desolate stretch of land, surrounded by tall grass and machinery, they discovered shallow grave sites. Under one patch of earth lay Shanann, buried in a crude hole. And just feet away, in 2 separate oil tanks, they found the bodies of Bella and Celeste. The girls had been submerged in crude oil for nearly 4 days. It wasn't long before Chris confessed, this time fully. He admitted to killing Shanann in their bedroom after she confronted him about the affair. He claimed she had been emotional, had cried, had accused him of ruining their family. And in a cold, calculated moment, he straddled her, pressed his hands to her throat, and ended her life. Their unborn son, Nico, died with her. But it didn't end there. As his wife lay dead at the foot of the bed, their daughters, just 3 and 4 years old, walked into the room. Bella asked, "What's wrong with Mommy?" Chris told her Mommy was sick. Then, still alive and trusting, the girls watched as their father wrapped their mother's body in a sheet and dragged her downstairs. He loaded Shanann into the back seat of his truck, then placed his 2 daughters into the vehicle beside her body. The drive to the oil site took nearly an hour. During that time, the girls sat in silence, holding on to life with innocent confusion. At the site, he took Celeste first. He suffocated her with her own blanket, then dropped her into the tank. Then he did the same to Bella. But what haunts most people is what Bella reportedly said before she died. "Daddy, no." 2 simple words. a child's final plea to the man who was supposed to protect her. It was later revealed that Bella had defensive wounds on her body, suggesting she fought back, small, futile acts of resistance from a little girl facing the unthinkable. The aftermath was a media storm. Chris Watts had portrayed himself as a devoted father. Their family photos painted a picture of perfection, matching outfits, vacations, smiling holidays. But behind closed doors, cracks had widened. Financial problems plagued them. Their marriage was strained, and Chris had become emotionally distant, obsessed with his affair and with the fantasy of a new life. To the public, the case felt like a punch in the gut. It wasn't just the brutality of the murders, it was the betrayal. A father who killed his entire family to escape the life he no longer wanted. A man who chose to erase his wife and children instead of facing divorce or starting over honorably. The trial never happened. Chris Watts took a plea deal in exchange for avoiding the death penalty. On November 19, 2018, he was sentenced to 5 life terms without the possibility of parole. 3 consecutive, 2 concurrent. Additional years were added for unlawful termination of a pregnancy and tampering with a dead body. In prison, Chris reportedly found religion. He claims to be a changed man, but for most, there is no redemption for what he did. The horror of the Watts case continues to echo because it tears apart the illusion of safety within the family home. It challenges our understanding of who we can trust. It reminds us that evil doesn't always come with warning signs. It can wear the face of a neighbor, a friend, a father. The final moments of Shanann, Bella, and Celeste are hard to imagine. A mother realizing she would never meet her unborn son. A child seeing her sister disappear and knowing she was next. The silence of the oil field. The betrayal of a father's hands. To this day, people revisit the case to search for answers. Could it have been prevented? Were there signs? Did Shanann know? The truth is, the human mind often cannot fathom the kind of darkness that led Chris Watts to do what he did. And yet it happened. In the end, the Watts family wasn't destroyed by strangers or tragedy. They were destroyed by the person they trusted most. And that is perhaps the most terrifying part of all. After the sentencing, Chris Watts was moved from Colorado to a prison in Wisconsin for his safety. Even among inmates, many of whom were serving time for murder, his crimes sparked disgust. The idea that a man could kill not just his wife, but his own children, and then stuff their small bodies into oil tanks, triggered a kind of revulsion that set him apart, even in a population used to violence. Inside Dodge Correctional Institution, Chris lived in a protective custody unit, isolated, watched. And yet letters began pouring in. From across the country and beyond, women began writing to him. Some sent photos, others expressed sympathy, even love. A strange and disturbing phenomenon that's not unique to this case, but is particularly chilling in its context. The psychology behind this kind of attention is often rooted in a fascination with danger, a desire to fix someone broken, or even the thrill of proximity to evil. But whatever the reason, the fact that Chris Watts, now known worldwide as a family annihilator, was receiving fan mail sparked public outrage. In the months that followed, more details emerged. Shanann's parents, Frank and Sandy Razuchek, gave heartbreaking interviews. They talked about their daughter's light, her strength, her love for her kids. They talked about Bella's gentle spirit, Celeste's energy and playfulness. They struggled to understand how the man who once vowed to protect them could become the one who destroyed them. They also revealed something else, that Shanann had sensed something was wrong. In the weeks leading up to her death, she'd confided in friends that Chris had grown distant, cold. He'd stopped touching her, stopped showing affection. During their trip to North Carolina that summer, he avoided intimacy. She wrote him letters, pleading to save their marriage. She blamed herself at times. But deep down, she feared there was someone else. And she was right. Nicole Kessinger, the woman Chris was having an affair with, became a major focus of media coverage. She cooperated with investigators, giving interviews and handing over her phone. Text messages, search history, and emails were examined with a fine-tooth comb. Kessinger claimed she had no idea Chris was still married. She said he told her the divorce was finalized. But investigators found Google searches on her phone that raised eyebrows. Phrases like, marrying your mistress. Can cops trace text messages? And even Amber Frey, the mistress in the Scott Peterson case. Still, there was no evidence Kessinger had any involvement in the murders. She vanished from public view shortly after the case broke. Reports say she entered witness protection or at least changed her identity. The backlash was swift and fierce. In the eyes of many, she had been the catalyst. But legally, Chris alone bore the responsibility. As time passed, the story didn't fade. If anything, it grew. Documentaries were released. Netflix's American Murder, The Family Next Door, became a viral sensation. The documentary, built almost entirely from real footage, body cams, text messages, social media posts, allowed viewers to watch the case unfold in real time. There were no actors, no dramatic reenactments, just raw reality. And that's what made it hit so hard. It showed Shanann's final moments, unknowingly filmed as she returned home from her trip, walking into the very house where she would be murdered hours later. It played Chris's police interviews, his fake tears, his monotone lies. It showed the officers' body cam footage as they searched the house. The documentary gave no space for speculation. It simply let the truth speak for itself. People were gripped by the case. Some obsessed over every detail, analyzing footage frame by frame, dissecting Chris's body language, speculating about his motives. Online communities formed, sharing theories and heartbreak. Others were enraged that such a horrific story could become, in some circles, entertainment. But beyond the noise, there was a core truth. Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and baby Nico were dead, and nothing would bring them back. Chris's motive remains a subject of debate. Some say it was lust. He wanted to be with Nickel and saw his family as an obstacle. Others point to narcissism, a cold detachment that allowed him to prioritize his desires over human life. Then there's the theory that it was premeditated, calculated. The oil site, the method, the timing. It all pointed to a man who planned. And yet Chris insists it wasn't premeditated. In letters he later sent from prison, he claimed he didn't know what came over him, that he was possessed, overtaken by darkness. He said he killed Shanann in a moment of rage, then didn't know what to do next. But few believe that. The fact that he transported the bodies, concealed the evidence, and went on to do media interviews, all while lying to the faces of those who loved his victims, suggests a man who knew exactly what he was doing. In one chilling prison letter, he revealed something else. He said after killing Shanann, Bella had watched silently, clutching a blanket. She asked if the same thing was going to happen to her, and he said yes. That moment, perhaps more than any other, encapsulates the evil of the crime. Not just the act itself, but the awareness, the coldness, the decision to proceed. Years later, Chris remains in prison. His appeals are over. His name has become synonymous with betrayal and monstrosity. And yet, he continues to correspond with people on the outside. Some out of curiosity, some from obsession. There are those who want to understand him, who write to him in search of answers, who wonder how a man so seemingly ordinary could do something so horrifying. But perhaps there is no understanding. Perhaps that's what makes the case so unforgettable. Not because it offers clarity, but because it doesn't. Because it forces us to sit with the discomfort that sometimes evil wears a mask, and sometimes it lives inside the walls of a picture-perfect home. Chris Watts will never be released. He will die in prison. But for those left behind, Shanann's family, her friends, and everyone who followed the case, the wounds remain open. The loss is not something that fades. Bella and Celeste never got to grow up. They never got to go to school dances, fall in love, or chase dreams. Nico never got to be born. Shanann never got to raise her children or see them become who they were meant to be. And for what? For a fantasy. For lust. Or cowardice. Chris didn't just kill his family, he erased them. He took their futures, their voices, their presence. And that is something no sentence can ever truly punish. The Watts home, once filled with laughter and the pitter-patter of little feet, was put up for auction. But no one wanted it. It sat empty for years, a shell of tragedy, a reminder of what happened there. Eventually, the property was taken off the market. Some say it still carries the weight of what happened, that no fresh paint or new furniture could ever erase the truth. In the end, the Chris Watts case lingers in the public consciousness not just because of its brutality, but because it shatters the illusion of normalcy. It challenges the idea that evil is always visible. It forces us to question what we think we know about love, loyalty, and the people we share our lives with. In the years following the murders, true crime communities have dissected every frame of footage, every text message, and every interview involving Chris Watts. Yet despite the analysis and theories, one question continues to hang in the air like a dark fog. Why? Not how. We know how. The timelines are clear. The method, the cover-up, the chilling precision. What still haunts people is the motive, the complete breakdown of human empathy in a man who showed none of the classic signs of impending violence. Chris had no criminal record. He had no known history of abuse. On the surface, he was just another husband, another dad, another guy smiling in Facebook family photos. But behind closed doors, something was unraveling. Chris, who once seemed passive and compliant, began transforming in the months leading up to the murders. He lost weight, changed his grooming habits, started working out more, and began pulling away emotionally. His friends described a quiet detachment. His co-workers noticed a man who kept to himself, who smiled but didn't say much. His wife, Shanann, noticed it too and documented it in her texts. In one of her final messages to a friend, she wrote, "He has changed. I don't know who he is anymore." In another, she said, "I'm scared. Something's wrong." These weren't the words of a paranoid spouse. They were the warnings of a woman whose instincts told her the man she loved was gone and that something darker had taken his place. In interviews from prison, Chris would later describe being in a daze, saying that the murders felt like they happened outside of his body. But those who have studied family annihilators, men who kill their entire families, know that this kind of behavior doesn't come from nowhere. It often stems from deep psychological dysfunction, an inability to cope with failure, a fear of losing control, or a narcissistic desire to preserve an image at all costs. In Chris's case, it appears to be all of the above. He was struggling financially. The Watts were behind on their mortgage. They were tens of thousands of rands in debt. Shanann had just returned from a business trip, and Chris knew that the facade of their life, perfect marriage, beautiful family, stability, was crumbling. And instead of facing it, he decided to erase it. Chris, the life he had built, was no longer convenient. It stood in the way of what he wanted. Freedom, a new woman, a fresh start. But rather than deal with that like an adult, through separation or divorce, he chose the most permanent and horrifying solution imaginable. He took not only Shanann's life, but those of Bella and Celeste, two children who still called him Daddy even as he ended their lives. Two little girls who trusted him, who believed he would keep them safe. Betrayal is what strikes hardest. The profound betrayal of a father who should have protected his daughters at any cost, not viewed them as obstacles to his selfish desires. As news outlets replayed the final footage of the girls, the videos Shanann posted of them singing, laughing, playing, it became impossible not to feel that loss deeply. Bella, the older sister, always taking care of her little sibling. Celeste, full of energy and joy. And baby Nico, who never got to draw his first breath. And Shanann, a woman who devoted herself to her children, who built a home out of love and loyalty. Her life became fodder for gossip in the aftermath, criticized by strangers who knew nothing of her journey. But the people who truly knew her, her parents, her friends, described a strong, passionate, determined woman. One who loved fiercely and lived out loud. One who didn't deserve what happened to her. In the time since the murders, Shanann's family has worked hard to protect her legacy. They've raised awareness about domestic violence. Not the kind that leaves bruises, but the kind that builds in silence, that hides in polite smiles and forced calm. They've spoken about the need to listen to women's fears, to believe them when they say they don't feel safe. They also created foundations in her memory, ensuring her name, and her children's names, would live on beyond the tragedy. For the rest of us, the case remains a scar on the modern psyche. It shattered the illusion that happy photos and smiling family moments mean safety. It exposed the cracks that can exist even in the most seemingly perfect homes. In a haunting twist, Chris Watts once wrote a letter from prison where he said he still sees his daughters in his dreams. He claimed that Bella and Celeste visit him at night, that they forgive him. But this only angered the public more. To many, these claims felt manipulative, self-serving, a man trying to rewrite a narrative that no one is willing to let him change. Psychologists have weighed in over the years. Some say Chris fits the profile of a covert narcissist, someone who flies under the radar but harbors deep entitlement and resentment. Others suggest antisocial tendencies, pointing to his complete lack of empathy in the aftermath. But perhaps the real horror lies in how ordinary he seemed. He wasn't a monster with a terrifying past. He was a man who snapped, or perhaps revealed who he really was all along. As for Nicole Kessinger, she has stayed out of the spotlight, but interest in her story has not waned. Many still blame her for the unraveling of Chris's marriage. Some sympathize with her, others vilify her. What's clear is that she was caught in the storm, willingly or not, and her life was changed forever. But the true victims are not Chris, not Nicole, not even the public haunted by the story. The true victims are the ones who never got a chance to live out their stories. Shanann, Bella, Celeste, Nico. A house in Frederick, Colorado, where the murders took place has become a symbol. A grim reminder that evil can hide in plain sight, that the people we love most are sometimes the ones who hurt us the deepest. It still stands, though it's often vacant. Some locals pass it quickly, refusing to look. Others pause, hoping to understand. But no one can truly explain what happened inside those walls. And maybe that's what makes the Chris Watts case endure. It's not just a murder story. It's a psychological riddle. A cautionary tale. A tragedy that unfolded in real time before a world of onlookers. It asks questions we may never answer. How can someone live a lie for so long? How can love turn to apathy, then to rage, then to murder? What are the warning signs we miss? Moments we brush off? The gut feelings we silence? And most of all, how do we make sense of the senseless? Chris Watts took 4 lives. He destroyed a family. And he changed the lives of everyone who loved them and everyone who followed the case forever. But in the aftermath, we remember. We remember Bella's soft voice singing, "My daddy is a hero." We remember Celeste's big smile. We remember Shanann's determination to build something beautiful, even when the odds were against her. Their lives mattered. Their voices mattered. And while Chris tried to silence them, the world has made sure their story will never be forgotten. In a world where we scroll past tragedy, this story stopped us. It made us feel. It made us angry. It made us mourn. And maybe that's why we keep coming back to it. Not for the horror, but for the humanity. Because in remembering them, we honor them. And that is something Chris Watts can never undo.